Long-haul truckers, have you ever encountered something eerie or paranormal during your night drives? Share your creepiest experiences on the road. Don't forget to like and subscribe, or else a spooky surprise might find its way to you tonight. I started to exceed the speed limit by a considerable margin, a noteworthy feat for a semi-trailer truck. As time passed, fatigue began to set in, but with just an hour remaining until my destination, I was determined to power through without a break. My eyelids grew heavy, and the struggle to keep them open intensified. I resorted to splashing water on my face, which provided a momentary wake-up call. At that time of night, my truck was the lone vehicle on the road, and aside from the illumination from my headlights, darkness enveloped the surroundings. I can recall vividly the moment when I reached for my water bottle to take a sip and nearly choked when I spotted a dark figure ahead on the road rapidly approaching. I slammed on the brake keys, allowing the truck to come to a halt, affording me a better view of the person standing almost dead center on the road. The individual appeared to be attired in a dark suit with a red scarf wound around their neck. What struck me as most peculiar was the person's remarkably elongated neck to the point of appearing grotesque. It's an odd detail to note, but the elongated neck was truly striking. However, their face remained an indistinct blur, devoid of distinguishable features. As my truck slowed and drew near this enigmatic figure, I contemplated rolling down my window to offer assistance. But before I could, the person abruptly turned to their left and bolted towards the nearby forest. In that instant, I didn't dwell much on the bizarre encounter. I simply accelerated and resumed my journey. Time was of the essence, after all. It was only about 20 seconds later that a creeping unease settled in, and my heart began to race as the true peculiarity of the situation dawned on me. Then something else transpired. As I accelerated once more, a figure appeared ahead on the road, dashing along it. Initially, it resembled an animal, but as it drew nearer and vanished into the forest, I realized it bore a humanoid resemblance. This time, I didn't slam on the brakes. I simply maintained my high speed. I continued down the road, occasionally increasing my speed out of growing anxiety. Fatigue weighed heavily on me, and I occasionally drifted into the opposite lane without even realizing it. With about 40 minutes of driving remaining, I began searching for a suitable spot to pull over and rest. I eventually spotted a small entrance to a dirt area. I guided my truck onto this patch of dirt, engaged the parking brake, reclined my seat, and closed my eyes. Sleep, however, proved elusive, and I awoke suddenly amidst the enveloping darkness outside. Through the windshield, an inexplicable instinct compelled me to turn on the headlights. As the beams of light pierced the blackness, they revealed a figure standing directly in front of the truck, a figure clad in a dark scarf, the same individual I had encountered on the road earlier. Now I could discern his face more distinctly. It featured an unnaturally wide grin, and in his eyes, he gazed directly at me through the windshield, prompting my heart to thunder in my chest. I hastily started the engine and sped away from that desolated dirt shoulder as fast as I could manage. My thoughts were a turbulent whirlwind. How could he have traversed a distance of 20 kilometers from where I first spotted him? I didn't stop again that night until I finally drifted off to sleep in a parking lot. Awakening early the next morning, as I roused myself, my rational mind sought a plausible explanation, chalking up the previous night's bizarre occurrences to the fatigue-induced tricks my mind played on me. After all, I had encountered numerous strange phenomena that night, but never had I experienced hallucinations so vivid and terrifying. To this day, the memory of that night's haunting realism continues to linger, a mystery I may never fully unrave. Thank you for joining me here on the channel again. If you're new here, consider subscribing, and drop a like on this video to show your support. I am your host commentator, let's begin. I've been working as a truck driver since I turned 30, and over the course of my career, I've had my fair share of night drives that led to some strange encounters. I've worked for various companies making deliveries that often required me to traverse the country, hauling electronic equipment along mountainous roads that stretched for hours. On this particular occasion, I was running late and knew most of my journey would be shrouded in darkness as I navigated the winding, desolate mountain roads. This gave me the freedom to accelerate a bit, but I had to be vigilant, ready to slam the brakes if anything appeared on the road. As I drove, I came across a car parked in the mountainous terrain beside the road. It was a vintage vehicle with its hazard lights on. Curious, I pulled up behind it, thinking that someone might be in need of assistance. I approached the car and lightly tapped on the window, but there was no response. Leaning in closer, I checked all the windows, confirming that the car was empty. Despite the limited visibility in the cold, dark mountain night, I felt a strong sense of empathy that evening and wanted to offer help. So, I returned to my truck, retrieved a flashlight from the toolbox beneath the passenger seat. This tactical flashlight emitted such a blindingly bright light that it could be painful if pointed directly at one's eyes. Previously, I may not have noticed, but the mountain pass was covered in a thin layer of snow, blending seamlessly with the surrounding peaks. The asphalt road was hardly visible, and the adjacent abandoned building appeared to be an old motel, likely a relic from days gone by. In that moment, it made sense to me that the owner of the blinking car might be inside the motel. So, I approached the front door, which was slightly ajar, with my flashlight illuminating a significant portion of the interior. I assumed it to be a typical roadside motel, found along less traveled routes. It was no surprise that such a motel couldn't thrive in the middle of the mountains. I called out, inquiring if anyone was inside and announcing my willingness to help. The sound of my voice echoed eerily within the desolate building, sending shivers down my spine. Then I heard a faint noise emanating from the other side of the motel, seemingly the sound of footsteps on the creaky wooden floor. The sound seemed to originate from rooms that likely once held travelers. I called out once more, offering assistance. I could distinctly discern what the whisperer had said, though I couldn't fathom why this person would utter those words. Additionally, I could hear heavy breathing emanating from one corner of the building, enough to send me rushing out of there and back to my truck. For a few bewildering moments, I was utterly disoriented, uncertain whether the sounds I had heard were real or figments of my imagination. I sprinted back to my truck and dialed the police out of sheer fright, too terrified to venture back inside. The police requested precise location details, but I couldn't provide an exact location, only that I was near a motel, specifically an abandoned one in the middle of the mountains. They instructed me to remain on the line, hoping for a better description of the location. Suddenly, the car parked in front of me roared to life and sped across the road. I was so disoriented that I hadn't even noticed when the person had entered the car. The darkness, combined with the distraction of the phone call, had thrown me off. I returned to the motel, still on the line with the police, to investigate if anyone remained inside. I headed to the back of the motel, where I had heard the voice and the breathing. What I encountered there left me paralyzed, a fresh pool of water on the floor, leading me to imagine the mysterious details of what had transpired. I informed the police over the phone that I may have witnessed a strange occurrence. Subsequently, the police dispatched multiple vehicles to the location. They asked for any potentially useful information, the car's license plate, the suspect's appearance, and the like. All I could provide was that the car was vintage and dark in color. I relayed that I had heard a male voice telling me to leave, followed by a woman's scream as I departed. There was no trace of any disturbances left behind. I had my theories about what might have unfolded, but I couldn't contribute significantly to the investigation. Unfortunately, I hadn't installed a dashboard camera on my truck at that time, which could have captured the license plate. However, within the next week, I made sure to acquire and install one. This incident was undoubtedly one of those rare experiences that occur once in a lifetime and will continue to haunt me for a long time to come. I don't recall the exact location. It's a tale my dad shared with me. My dad decided to pull over for some rest on the roadside after a long day of driving through the outskirts of a bustling city in the fall of 2010. It was around the same time that Inception had hit theaters, and I remember my parents taking us to see it. Anyway, my dad finds a quiet spot, parks his truck, closes the little curtain in his sleeper berth, and settles in for some sleep. In the midst of the early 2010s, my dad begins to experience a vivid nightmare. In this dream, two eerie children, reminiscent of the ones tormenting and mocking characters in the film, appear on the hood of his truck, attempting to gain entry. In the dream, my dad frantically searches for a weapon to defend himself. Suddenly, he's jolted awake by 3 loud knocks on the back of his truck. Startled, he springs up, glancing at his mirrors to catch a glimpse of the source, only to find nothing but darkness outside. He tries to dismiss it as a lingering part of his dream and lies back down. However, as soon as he rests his head, another set of 3 distinct knocks echoes from the same spot. Creeped out, he wastes no time and drives away until he reaches the nearest vibrant city. Even today, the recounting of this tale gives him goosebumps. It's not a trucker's usual encounter, but the strangeness of that night lingers in his memory. I found myself on a solo journey back home from a vacation, navigating the roads in my pickup truck while towing a camper. The clock had just struck 11 p.m. on a summer night, and I still had about 2 hours left until I reached the comfort of my own space. Eager to conclude the trip that night, I found myself traversing through a dense wooded area, approximately 50 miles of nothing but trees crowding both sides of the road. Every now and then, a lonely house would break the monotony, spaced out at intervals of about 5 miles. As the dark surroundings enveloped me, I noticed movement up ahead. My instincts kicked in, and I eased off the gas, anticipating a possible encounter with a deer on the road. However, as I approached, I discerned a young woman walking along the extreme shoulder near the ditch. Striding with the flow of traffic, she wore knee-high socks, a remarkably short pleated cheerleader skirt, and a halter top. Towering in height, she possessed long brown hair that flowed as she walked. Given the remote location on a road that barely witnessed a few cars per hour, my immediate assumption was that she was in some kind of distress. Perhaps a dispute with a boyfriend, left stranded, or dealing with car troubles. Slowing down further, I pulled over, activated the emergency flashers, secured the parking brake, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped out of the vehicle, intending to offer assistance. As I reached the rear of the trailer, a chill ran down my spine. She was nowhere to be seen. Perplexed, I swung the flashlight up and down both sides of the road, scanned the ditches, and even scrutinized the tree line, but there was no sign of her. The remainder of my journey home was marked by the eerie feeling of the hair on the back of my neck standing on end, the mysterious encounter leaving me with more questions than answers. In the late 1970s, around 1978 to be precise, my grandpa found himself hauling canned goods from Texas to California. The peculiar incident occurred at around 1 a.m. in the desolate expanses of Arizona, what he refers to as middle of nowhere. As he tells it, he noticed something unusual in his rearview mirror, a truck rapidly approaching. As it drew nearer, he discerned a 1940s Peterbilt truck with an aged reefer trailer barreling down the road at an astonishing 100 miles per hour. Flames danced out of the stack, sparks flew from the wheels, and the cacophony emanating from the truck was reminiscent of impending doom. Being a prudent driver, my grandpa slowed down to allow the mysterious truck to overtake him. To his astonishment, the Peterbilt pulled alongside him. When he peered at the driver, he was met with a chilling sight, a faceless figure with no jaw and pitch-black eyes. Before he could fully comprehend the surreal encounter, the Peterbilt abruptly swerved, colliding with his truck and sending it careening into the ditch. Fortunately, he managed to slide in without sustaining more severe injuries. After collecting his nerves and assessing the situation, he cautiously stepped out of his truck to inspect the damage. The driver's side cowl wheel arch and fuel tank bore substantial damage, accompanied by ominous burn marks. The incident left an indelible mark on my grandpa, a man not easily shaken. Having faced rattlesnakes, and worked in the unforgiving oil fields before transitioning to a career in trucking. Even decades later, he remains reluctant to revisit the eerie tale, a testament to the profound impact it had on him. I'm a trucker. I think the creepiest thing that ever happened to me was when I was heading out from Albuquerque, New Mexico, up into Boise, Idaho. Well, this was around a few years ago now, and during the time, the main highway had been taken out with a flash flood. It was under construction, so I had to take a weird detour through the mountains in eastern Oregon. It was getting late, and I was getting pretty tired, so I decided to pull off onto this shoulder and went to sleep in my bunk. Now, this was in the middle of nowhere. The closest town was like 50 miles away, so it was completely pitch black outside once I turned the lights off. Anyway, around 4 a.m., I wake up because I'm hearing something messing with my truck, like playing with the air and power cables between my cab and the trailer, which is literally 6 inches from where my head is at but on the outside of the cab. Then all of a sudden, I feel something climb onto the landing that's on the back of my truck. It begins to shake my whole truck back and forth, so I'm guessing something around 200 to 300 pounds was climbing around the back there. I'm thinking like a mountain lion or maybe even a bear at this point. I'm wide awake and want to get this thing away from me, so I decide to slam my hand onto my cab wall, trying to scare whatever is out there. I slam hard enough to make a loud noise. About a minute later, I then hear someone, a male, screaming, and I hear them fall off the back of my truck. I then hear about 15 other people all around my truck yelling. I climb up front, turn on my lights, and illuminate a squad of National Guard doing their midnight rock march and capture drills in the middle of the forest. Turns out these guys were supposed to find an abandoned truck and secure it for their midnight drills. That truck just so happened to be 5 miles back down the road. They were not expecting me to be sleeping there and thought that I was actually part of their drill. I'm ex-military. So after explaining I was not part of their test, and legit, was just there after a coincidence because of the road being blocked off, we sat and laughed it off. They had to radio to their CO and tell him I was there and not have the other squad bother me once again throughout the night. Across the vast landscapes of South Dakota, one night in the dead of night, I was hauling across Nebraska, aiming to reach Wyoming by early morning. I was delivering a particularly crucial combine part that a farm urgently needed for the following day. So the pressure was on, and I was trying everything I could to adhere to the speed limits, but also get to that farm by the early morning. I began to notice some highway hypnosis sneaking up on me, but it didn't really bother me because I'd been through it hundreds of times before as an experienced trucker, and had been driving for over 2 decades by this point. Anyone who has driven across Nebraska knows that it's incredibly flat, like really flat. There also tends to be very straight and long roads. It's somewhat easy to see things on the road that are far away, even at night in the pitch black. I noticed something long on the road up ahead spanning my entire lane, approximately half a mile in front of me. I slowed down a little and prepared to move on to the opposite lane where incoming traffic would be on the other side because it was so late. There was no one in the incoming lanes, so I figured it would be safe. I thought it was some retread, basically fallen or ripped off a blown-out tire. However, as I got closer, I noticed it was 2 people. They were laying head to toe across the entire lane. Immediately, I swerved into the other lane, successfully avoiding them, and came to an almost complete stop. But they didn't move, not an inch. Their bodies lay there lifeless, and I was really thinking I'd just come across 2 lifeless bodies in the middle of nowhere. I was just about to back up and check on them when I remembered a story that an old colleague of mine told me and warned me about. He told me that in certain remote areas, people will lie down in the middle of the road and wait for a car or truck to stop and see if they are okay and what's going on. At this point, the road layers along with whoever else is hiding in the nearby bushes or tree line will beat you up, steal your vehicle, and leave you in the middle of nowhere. I decided not to back up, and when the 2 people in the road saw me put my truck back in gear and drive away, they both got up and walked towards the hard shoulder. I immediately called the police and explained what had happened, but we were so far away from civilization that I doubt anything came of it. Thanks to that old colleague, I got to keep my truck, my job, and my teeth. Possibly even my life. Those people were hiding in that tree line, and I never knew how many were there. If I hadn't remembered that story that I was told by a good colleague of mine, I would have most likely not be here to tell this story, or I'd be telling it with it ending a lot worse. As I drove my truck along the long stretch of highway, the hum of the engine filled the car, providing a sense of comfort during this solo journey. Thoughts of the miles ahead consumed my mind until a figure appeared on the side of the road. A traveler, thumb outstretched, seeking refuge from the vast void. It was a familiar sight, one I had seen many times in my travels. A mixture of sympathy and caution ran through me as I thought about their request for a ride. Ignoring the nagging feeling of discomfort, I stopped, the sound of tires on gravel signaling my stop. The traveler approached, his face partly hidden by a worn hat. A subtle feeling of discomfort surfaced, an instinctive warning that she pushed aside in the spirit of kindness. They got into the car, the smell of uncertainty still lingering in the tight space. Polite exchanges filled the silence as we embarked on this unexpected journey together. However, as the miles piled up, a growing anxiety settled in. The casual conversation took a chilling turn when the traveler revealed his disturbing fascination with dark and morbid topics. Their eyes sparkled with frightening intensity, focusing on the most evil aspects of human nature. Against my better judgment, I realized that I had unwittingly allowed a stranger with disturbing thoughts within the confines of my truck. Unease turned to panic as their behavior changed, becoming increasingly erratic and alarming. Their words became disjointed, carrying an ominous undertone that sent shivers down my spine. I looked in the rearview mirror, saw their evil smile, and a wave of panic washed over me. The car seemed to move forward with supernatural force as the traveler's malicious intentions came to light, their twisted desires and dark fantasies rising like a storm, threatening to swallow us all together. Fear coursed through my veins, sparking a strong determination to escape this nightmare unscathed. I gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands, focused on the only goal: survival. Thoughts of self-preservation overshadowed any lingering doubts or compassion. The highway stretched before me like a lifeline, promising salvation from this whirlwind of terror. My heart pounded in my chest, a symphony of terror and adrenaline as I concocted a desperate plan. I spotted a rest stop ahead of us, a potential refuge in the chaos. You have become a beacon of hope for me, and my only chance to break free from the clutches of this nightmare. The traveler's demands became more serious, and their threats escalated with every passing moment. But I refused to give in to the paralysis of fear. As the rest stop approached, I took the opportunity to escape, veering off the highway with a calculated maneuver that caused the passenger to lose his balance. The screeching sound of tires pierced the air as I parked the car. I opened the door without hesitation, adrenaline sending me on a desperate flight to safety. The traveler's pained laugh echoed in the distance, a horrifying reminder of the danger I had narrowly avoided. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and called for help, narrating the horrific incident to the authorities. The weight of the experience settled on me, a stark realization that malevolence can lurk within the ordinary, hidden under the guise of the everyday traveler. The road stretched forward, a road once full of adventure and possibility, but now tainted by the echoes of that encounter. The traveler's face haunted my nightmares, a constant reminder of the darkness lurking within the human soul. I continued my journey, forever changed by that nightmarish encounter. The traveler's presence remained, a chilling reminder of the fragility of trust and the importance of heeding one's instincts. I vowed to remain vigilant, to navigate the highways with an unwavering sense of caution, and never again to underestimate the potential horrors to be found in the company of a stranger. The purr of the engine and the rhythmic beat of the tires provided a comforting soundtrack as I guided my truck through the deserted stretch of interstate. It was late evening, and the darkness had draped itself over the landscape, As I pressed on, my senses were on high alert, acutely aware of the isolation that surrounded me. In the distance, an unexpected sight caught my attention, a makeshift barrier blocking the otherwise empty road. Instinctively, I slowed my truck, my eyes scanning for any signs of authority or legitimate reason for the blockade. To my dismay, the figures emerging from the shadows weren't law enforcement officers, but a menacing group of thugs. Tension hung heavy in the air, and a shiver ran down my spine as their predatory gazes locked onto me. I knew I had stumbled upon something ominous, something more than a mere inconvenience. Determined to outwit the gang and navigate this perilous encounter, I brainstormed for a strategy. A surge of adrenaline fueled me as I considered my options, fully aware that one wrong move could lead to dire consequences. I needed to think fast, exploiting any vulnerability that might give me the upper hand. As I cautiously maneuvered my car, attempting to find an alternative route, the situation took a bizarre turn. Strange events unfolded around me, defying logical explanation. Shadows played tricks at the edges of my vision, and whispers danced through the air, their source elusive. With each passing moment, suspense mounted, coiling its icy tendrils around my heart. The gang's actions became increasingly peculiar and unpredictable, stretching the limits of my comprehension. It was as if reality itself had unraveled, transforming into a distorted nightmare. Desperate to escape their clutches, I veered off the road, plowing through the untamed wilderness that bordered the interstate. Branches scraped against the sides of my truck, their skeletal fingers reaching out as if attempting to ensnare me. Yet, the gang pursued with unrelenting determination, fueled by malicious intent. They seemed undeterred by the challenging terrain and the chaotic wilderness that surrounded us. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I clung to a fragile thread of hope, praying for a stroke of luck or a momentary respite. The world around me blurred into a frenzy of adrenaline-fueled action, a whirlwind of evasion and survival. I navigated hazardous slopes, battled against the grip of mud, and pushed my car to its limits. Fear and exhaustion vied for dominance within me, threatening to erode my resolve. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a glimmer of salvation emerged, a flickering neon sign in the distance. A small town materialized before my weary eyes, its twinkling lights promising refuge and assistance. With renewed determination, I pressed on, the anticipation of safety propelling me forward. As my car rolled into the town center, the gang's presence dissipated like a nightmare, fading with the morning sun. The locals, unaware of the events on the road, carried on with their lives, casting curious glances my way. I sought refuge in the local police station, recounting the harrowing encounter I had endured. They listened attentively, their expressions a blend of concern and disbelief. Deep down, I knew this encounter would haunt me, a nightmare etched into the core of my being. I continued my journey, forever changed by the surreal experience. The open road, once a symbol of freedom, now carried an undercurrent of unease. The darkness that lingered on the fringes of our everyday lives had revealed its chilling face, a stark reminder of the fragility of our existence. The driver in me would never be the same. The road would forever bear witness to the horrors that can lie in wait, reminding me of the nightmare I had faced and survived. And as I drove into the distance, I pledged to remain vigilant, ready to confront whatever nightmares the road might conceal. I had been on the road for hours, the repetitive drone of the engine lulling me into a state of weariness. The countryside was shrouded in darkness as I navigated the desolate highway. The digital clock on my dashboard flashed 2 a.m., a time when most people were deep in slumber. Suddenly, a jolt and a loud thud rocked the truck, and the unmistakable sound of a flat tire echoed through the night. I maneuvered the truck to the side of the road, frustration and exhaustion washing over me. This was the last thing I needed on a cold, desolate night. Retrieving my phone, I dialed my boss's number. He reassured me that help was on the way, but it would take a few hours before the recovery truck could arrive. Resigned to my fate, I stepped out of the truck to inspect the damage. Standing there, feeling the chill of the night air, a car pulled up beside me. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a friendly face named Alex. He offered me a hot drink from his thermos, a welcome gesture on this freezing night. Grateful for the warmth, I accepted and took a sip of the comforting liquid. The aroma of coffee filled my senses, momentarily easing the discomfort of the cold darkness. We engaged in casual conversation as I sipped, the dialogue flowing effortlessly. However, after about 20 minutes, a peculiar sensation enveloped me. The world seemed to spin, and my head grew heavy. Panic seized me as I realized something was terribly wrong. Struggling to speak, my words slurred, and my limbs felt leaden, as if weighed down by invisible shackles. Fear surged through me, and I fought to comprehend the situation. Through blurred vision, I saw Alex's smile morph into a sinister grin. It dawned on me, the drink he had given me was laced with something that was now taking control of my body and mind. Desperation fueled my fight for survival. With every ounce of strength, I stumbled away from the car, my vision fading in and out. I needed help to escape this nightmare. But as I staggered down the deserted road, the surroundings twisted and distorted. Shadows played tricks on me, their elongated forms mocking my feeble attempts to flee. Time became irrelevant as I stumbled through the darkness, my body growing weaker. I could feel my consciousness slipping away, my thoughts muddled and disjointed. Suddenly, a distant rumble reached my ears, the sound of an approaching vehicle. Summoning a final surge of energy, I pushed myself forward, desperately hoping it was my salvation. Through the haze, I saw the headlights of the recovery truck piercing the darkness. Relief washed over me as the driver rushed to my aid. He called for medical help and assured me that I would be okay. Lying in the back of the ambulance, weakened and trembling, I couldn't help but wonder who Alex was and why he had targeted me. What was his motive, and would he strike again? The answers eluded me, lost in the darkness that had consumed me. But one thing was certain. I had narrowly escaped a nightmare, a sinister encounter that would haunt me for the rest of my days. From that night on, I vowed to remain vigilant, to trust my instincts, and to be wary of those who offered help in the darkest hours. For sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight, preying on unsuspecting victims. And as I continue my journey as a trucker, I carry the weight of that nightmare with me, a constant reminder that evil can lurk in the most ordinary of circumstances. As a trucker, I've encountered my fair share of strange occurrences on the road. But the most chilling experience I ever had took place on a clear, occult-like night in December. I was transporting a load of furniture across the country, making good time as I cruised down the highway, fully engrossed in my own thoughts. However, the tranquility shattered when I noticed an anomaly in my rearview mirror. A truck trailed behind me, steadily closing the distance. Initially, I assumed it was just another trucker attempting to overtake me, but as it neared, an unsettling realization took hold. This vehicle was ancient and worn, covered in rust that seemed to consume its entire body. The driver, hidden in the shadows, appeared disheveled and sleep-deprived, his manic, bloodshot eyes fixed intensely on me. I attempted to accelerate, hoping to put some distance between us, but the mysterious truck stayed persistently on my tail. Fear crept in, and the thought of pulling over to contact the police crossed my mind. Before I could act, however, the aged truck swerved into the adjacent lane. The driver leaned out of the window, yelling something incomprehensible over the roar of the engines. Abruptly, as if it were never there, the truck disappeared into the night. I didn't cease driving until I reached the next rest stop. There, I locked my doors, trying to shake off the lingering fear that had gripped me. Even though I never saw the rust-covered truck again, the trauma of that night persisted. Continuing my journey, I couldn't shake the feeling of being under scrutiny. Every glance in the rearview mirror heightened the paranoia that the worn-out truck might reappear. The unsettling incidents persisted, radio signals crackling, shadows dancing along the road, leaving me ensnared in an unending nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, I finally reached my destination, relieved to be off the road and away from the eerie darkness. However, as I exited my truck, the relief was short-lived. Parked just a few spaces away was the aged, rust-covered truck. The driver was nowhere to be seen, but his spectral presence enveloped me, signaling that my nightmare was far from over. I was driving my truck down a deserted highway, the only sound being the hum of my engine and the occasional passing car. It was a typical night on the road until I noticed a hitchhiker standing on the side. I usually don't pick up hitchhikers, but something about this one caught my eye. Perhaps the desperate expression or the fact that he was holding a small backpack. Deciding to give him a ride, considering it's not every day that I see someone stranded, he hopped into the passenger seat, introducing himself as Jack. He explained that he was on his way to visit family, his car having broken down a few miles back. Grateful for the ride, he offered to split the cost of gas. We chatted, exchanging stories about our lives on the road. Although Jack seemed like a nice guy, something about him made me uneasy. His fidgeting with the backpack and avoidance of eye contact raised my suspicion. As we continued driving, the sky darkened and rain started to pour. I suggested pulling over to wait out the storm, but Jack insisted on continuing. Reluctantly, I agreed. However, as we drove deeper into the storm, I regretted my decision. The wind howled, and the rain made it almost impossible to see. Suddenly, Jack reached over, grabbed the steering wheel, and pulled us off the road into a ditch. Frantically trying to regain control, it was too late. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere, in the midst of a storm. Jack, now laughing maniacally, pulled out a knife and approached me with madness in his eyes. I realized then that he wasn't just a hitchhiker, he was a criminal. Fighting back, I struggled against his strength. He dragged me out of the truck into the pouring rain, his knife glinting in the darkness. Certain of my impending doom, I refused to go down without a fight. With all my strength, I managed to break free and ran into the woods. Stumbling through the underbrush, I didn't stop until I reached a small cabin. There, I banged on the door until someone answered. The man who answered let me in and called the police, arriving just in time to catch Jack, a dangerous criminal who had been on the run for years, preying on unsuspecting truckers like me. I was lucky to escape with my life, but the memory of that night still haunts me. I never pick up hitchhikers again, and always make sure to check my surroundings before setting out on a long haul. You never know who you might come across on the road. The night enveloped the desolate stretch of highway, far removed from the glow of city lights. My headlights cut through the darkness as I navigated the remote road. The absence of stars and the obscured moon by heavy clouds added an eerie touch to the darkness. Sipping coffee and engrossed in a podcast, I approached a particularly isolated section of the highway when something caught my eye. A figure, barely visible in the weak glow of my headlights, was walking along the road's edge. A woman, it seemed, in a dress wholly unsuited to the season or situation, and barefoot. My heart skipped a beat. Encountering a pedestrian here, so far from civilization at such a late hour, filled me with a mix of apprehension and responsibility. It wasn't safe for anyone to be walking along this pitch-black highway, and she must need help. I signaled and pulled my truck to a stop on the shoulder. Climbing out of the cabin, the biting cold night air greeted me as I approached the spot where I had seen the figure. A peculiar chill crawled down my spine. However, there was no one there. Scanning the area with my flashlight, the road lay empty. The only sounds were the distant hum of the engine and the chirping of crickets. What on earth is happening? I wondered. I couldn't have imagined the figure. It had been so distinct. Calling out into the darkness, I asked if anyone needed assistance, but there was no response, just an eerie silence hanging heavily in the air. Uneasy, I returned to my truck and waited, looking around, trying to make sense of the strange encounter before deciding to continue down the highway. Stopping at a nearby truck stop for a break, I decided to inquire with the waitress in the diner about the area. With an annoyed look, she shared the story of a woman who had met her tragic end in a traffic accident on that very stretch of highway years ago. It was said that her restless spirit would appear to travelers at night from time to time. Although the waitress had never seen her, It added to the list of strange occurrences on the open road, making it the creepiest encounter I had experienced. I've encountered plenty of strange and creepy things during my years as a long-haul trucker, some you wouldn't even believe. Hell, I don't even believe most of them and put them down as hallucinations from sleep deprivation. But the creepiest for me wasn't some ghost on the side of the road. It wasn't some possible cryptid running along my truck. It was another human, well, physically anyway. I was driving on a lonely, desolate stretch of highway on a moonless night. All that accompanied me was my engine, Tom, and the long road ahead. It was really dark outside, and the only light was from the truck's headlights cutting through the night. I'd been driving for about 2 hours when, as I turned a corner, my headlights showed something strange up ahead. There was a person hunched over in the middle of the road. I quickly hit the brakes, making my truck screech to a stop. My heart was racing as I looked through the windshield, trying to understand what was going on. It was a man hunched over something on the road. He looked messy with wet and dirty clothes. To my horror, he was tearing at what seemed to be an animal that had been hit by a car. My headlight showed all the horrible details. The man was tearing into a deer's stomach that lay still on the ground, obviously roadkill. He was tearing into it with his hands and teeth, bringing the still dripping meat into his mouth. His hands and face were covered with dark, wet stains. The smell was awful. What the... That's all I managed to get out before my gag reflex kicked in. I was really scared and grossed out. Like, what kind of person does this? Was he a threat? Was he all there mentally? Not knowing what else to do, I grabbed my phone and called 911. The person on the other end sounded like they didn't believe me at first, but they became more concerned when it became apparent that I was telling the truth. They said help was coming and told me to stay in my truck while I waited. I couldn't stop looking at the man. He just kept eating, not noticing the police sirens coming closer. It felt like forever, minutes dragging on, and I can't even begin to describe how sick and unnerved I felt. When the police got there, they went up to the man, and it was like he suddenly woke up from a weird trance. They took him away and asked me a lot of questions about what I had seen. They let me go after that, and I had no idea what happened to the man. I never got a follow-up. I'm guessing he had some kind of mental problem, but who really knows? After that, I kept driving, but I couldn't forget that strange and creepy moment. The sight of the flesh and the gore was in my head for some time after. In fact, I couldn't stand the sight of raw meat for a while. While my life was never in danger, it still was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. I hope the man got the help he clearly needed in the end. Wow. As a seasoned truck driver with more than 2 decades of experience, I believed I had witnessed every possible scenario along the extensive roadways connecting the primary cities of Canada. However, on one fateful night, while navigating the isolated stretch between Winnipeg and Vancouver, I encountered something that defied all reason and continues to baffle me to this day. The night was crisp, the sky enveloped in an immeasurable darkness, with the stars shining brilliantly overhead. The sheer number of stars became evident in the absence of city lights. As my truck rolled along the lonesome highway, I noticed an array of oddly hued lights in the sky, larger and brighter than the rest. Initially, I dismissed them as aircraft or satellites, but as I pressed on, the lights appeared to draw nearer, mimicking the speed and trajectory of my truck. An unsettling feeling washed over me, and I couldn't shake the notion that they were tailing me. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the lights maintained their unwavering pursuit. My heart pounded, and an overwhelming sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. With the weighty cargo I was transporting, driving under these conditions was already perilous. Reluctantly, I pulled over to the side of the highway, intending to use my radio to seek assistance or report the mysterious occurrence. However, all I received was harsh static, akin to aggressive interference. The lights continued their mystifying display in the night sky, their radiance pulsating in an inexplicable rhythm. Time crawled by as I struggled to comprehend the spectacle before me. Were these lights a mere illusion, or had I become a witness to some otherworldly event? Eventually, the lights gradually receded into the distance, leaving me alone in the vast expanse of the open road. Yet, an even more disconcerting revelation awaited me. The dashboard clock now read 3:42 a.m. The last time I had checked, it had shown 12:05 a.m. Hours had seemingly evaporated in what felt like no more than 10 minutes. My recollection was hazy, and I couldn't pinpoint anything specific during that missing time. How I couldn't even grasp the concept of time eluding me. It took a while to regain my composure. After such an unusual encounter, I trembled like a leaf and struggled to discern between reality and imagination. Eventually, the adrenaline subsided, and I decided to take a brief nap for safety. I disregarded the potential disruption to my schedule. The unease lingered, a feeling of vulnerability rooted in the uncertainty of what had transpired, yet convinced it was anything but ordinary. Upon reaching my destination, I shared my experience with another trucker who was taking a short break before hitting the road again. He reassured me that many others had encountered similar phenomena and commended my decision to pull over. As an experienced trucker, I had faced myriad challenges on the road, but that night's enigma, I simply cannot elucidate. The lights and the mysterious time lapse will forever haunt my memory, serving as a poignant reminder that the unexplained looms in the expansive reaches of Canada's highways. This is the tale of the most unsettling experience I've encountered on the road. While perhaps not as chilling as some stories you might hear, it rattled me to the core and remains a situation unlike any other I've heard from fellow drivers. Here's the account. The night was balmy, a gentle summer breeze wafting through my truck as I cruised along the seemingly endless roads. I'm accustomed to the solitude and silence, being a seasoned long-distance trucker, but this particular night, with the moon hanging low, carried an unexplainable tension. Several hours into my drive, darkness enveloping the landscape, my headlights piercing the night, I noticed a faint movement in my side mirror. Squinting, I strained to discern the source. There, clutching the side of my trailer, was a shadowy figure. My heart quickened as I grappled with the surreal scene unfolding before me. I hadn't made any stops, and I was certain no one had boarded while I was parked earlier. Panic set in when I realized an unauthorized person was clinging to my truck. Trembling, I grabbed my radio, seeking assistance from the nearest police. The voice on the other end assured me help was on the way and urged me to stay inside the truck. Confusion and fear swirled within me. I had no insight into this person's intentions or whether they were armed. Moreover, their precarious position on the truck posed a significant risk of injury, for which I felt a sense of responsibility. Against the backdrop of the dark night, the mysterious figure remained elusive, their presence intensifying the unease with every passing mile. Anxiety gripped me as the person inched closer to the cabin. Then, a wave of relief washed over me as I spotted flashing red and blue lights approaching, the police sirens growing louder. The intruder seemed to sense impending capture, swiftly ascending to the roof of my trailer and disappearing from my view. Terrified and helpless, I observed as the police swiftly closed in. They directed me to pull over gradually and instructed me to stay in the truck. They surrounded my vehicle, and from my elevated vantage point, I anxiously scanned for any sign of the mystery person. Time dragged on, tension thick in the air, until finally, they apprehended the intruder. The individual appeared disheveled and frightened, having hitched a ride without my knowledge. I couldn't fathom their motives, but it was evident that both of us were in considerable danger. Fortunately, they lacked any weapons, and their intentions toward me seemed benign. As the police led the person away from my truck, a sigh of relief escaped me, grateful to have emerged unscathed from this harrowing encounter. It served as a stark reminder of the unforeseen dangers lurking on dark highways, hopefully a lesson learned for both myself and the unexpected stowaway. In my decade-long career as a truck driver, I've encountered my fair share of odd and eerie incidents, from catching whiffs of plumeria to stumbling upon mysterious white fabric hanging from trees. However, none of these encounters compares to the bone-chilling experience I'm about to recount. With over a decade of truck driving under my belt, I'd never found myself in a situation where I genuinely feared for my life until a harrowing incident 2 months ago. My nightly journeys typically kick off around 8:30 p.m., taking advantage of the eased traffic flow out of Kuala Lumpur City. On this particular night, I had a relatively short trip ahead, deliveries and pickups in the city of Kuantan, roughly a 3-hour drive from Kuala Lumpur. The journey to Kuantan went without a hitch, and I arrived just before midnight. The factory staff, familiar faces from numerous previous deliveries, were already awaiting my arrival. Osman, a night shift supervisor with whom I'd developed a camaraderie over the years, handed me a steaming cup of coffee, expressing his gratitude with a casual, "You're a lifesaver, man." We engaged in small talk about life and work as we efficiently unloaded the truck. Everything seemed ordinary until a new staff member decided to bring up the infamous haunted Karak Expressway, notorious for supernatural tales, including the legendary yellow Volkswagen and other eerie incidents. Osman, a believer in the superstitions surrounding late-night discussions of the supernatural, warned against venturing back to Kuala Lumpur right away. Despite his caution, curiosity got the better of him, and he prodded me about the rumored yellow Volkswagen. I dismissed it as an urban legend, steering the conversation toward a different topic by recounting a past encounter with would-be muggers. With the truck unloaded, I proceeded to the pickup location. The load wasn't as hefty as the drop-off, so by 1:30 a.m., I was on my way back to Kuala Lumpur, ahead of schedule. The road was eerily quiet, occasional vehicles passing by under the dim glow of streetlights. The night was further obscured by thick rain clouds, and the lack of moonlight intensified the darkness. As raindrops splattered against my windshield, I finally decided to roll up the window and switch on the air conditioner. Soon after, a mist enveloped the surroundings, and faint red dots emerged ahead, the taillights of a yellow Volkswagen Beetle. I overtook the car, dismissing the coincidence, only for the same yellow Beetle to reappear, mirroring my speed. What sent shivers down my spine was the absence of a driver or passenger in the car. Transfixed with fear, I couldn't tear my eyes away until a loud honk from another trucker jolted me back to reality. I had been hurtling at a perilous speed, dangerously close to colliding with the road divider. The timely honk acted as a lifesaver, snapping me out of my trance, and I managed to avert a potential disaster. Despite the terrifying encounter, I pressed on. The next day, I succumbed to a fever, but duty prevailed, as I continued to fulfill my role as the sole breadwinner for my family, fully aware of the unnerving reality that occasionally looms on the highways. On a desolate night, trucker Jake embarked on a long journey through remote landscapes, a route he was familiar with due to his years of experience. The solitude and silence enveloped him as he focused on the endless road, ensuring every detail was observed for safety. Little did he know that this trip would spiral into a nightmarish ordeal. The monotonous speed of the road seemed unending until Jake noticed a dark figure on the roadside, a man waving desperately, pleading for a ride. Despite an internal hesitance, Jake, driven by his compassionate nature, decided to offer assistance and brought the stranger into the truck. As they continued the journey, the man's demeanor grew increasingly peculiar, accompanied by an unsettling rotten smell in the air. The passenger's behavior escalated, repeatedly uttering a chilling phrase, "You can't get out. There's no way out of here." Perplexed and disturbed, Jake attempted to engage the man in conversation, only to be met with an eerie grin. Abruptly, the man vanished into thin air, leaving Jake stunned and frightened. The horrors were far from over. Strange, unrecognizable figures emerged around the truck, desperate to halt its progress. Their eyes glowed with anger as they screamed and pounded on the vehicle, hungry for retribution. Jake realized he was trapped in a nightmarish ordeal, surrounded by the souls of those who perished in road accidents, cursed and unable to move on. Fueled by fear, Jake accelerated, attempting to distance himself from the vengeful ghosts, but they relentlessly pursued him. Finally reaching a gas station, he sought refuge, barricading himself inside, hoping the spectral entities wouldn't breach the sanctuary. Confused and scared, Jake shared his traumatic experience with gas station employees, who, shocked by his account, suggested calling the police. The police arrived, yet found no trace of the supernatural entities. They speculated that exhaustion and fatigue might have played tricks on Jake's perception. The incident left Jake traumatized, prompting a shift in his approach to driving. He vowed to avoid solo night trips, opting for daytime travels and always ensuring he had a companion for safety. Jake shared his story with fellow truckers, turning it into a cautionary tale about the hidden dangers that may lurk on seemingly benign roads. Over time, Jake grappled with the aftermath of the harrowing experience. Though he continued his career in the trucking industry, he remained vigilant and discerning on the road, a testament to the lasting impact of his paranormal encounter. This unsettling story serves as a reminder that the world harbors mysteries and dangers, especially on desolate roads at night, urging caution and alertness. The tale unfolded a few years ago, leaving an indelible mark on Jake's memory and the consciousness of those who heard his chilling account. Driving a flatbed and tasked with picking up construction material in the remote rural areas of Tennessee, the journey started uneventfully. However, about 5 minutes down the road, in the middle of nowhere, Jake noticed his tarp flapping in the wind. Opting for a wide shoulder on the 2-lane road, he decided to pull over and fix the issue. As he began retarping the load, a sense of unease crept in. Jake saw a man walking down the same side of the road toward his truck. Initially dismissing it, Jake continued with his task. But as the stranger approached, something about him set off alarm bells. The man's disheveled appearance, strange eyes, and peculiar hands with claw-like nails raised concerns. Sensing a potential threat, Jake took precautions, placing his winch bar within reach. The stranger finally arrived, stating, "I've got a long walk." Trying to convey there was no ride to offer, in this desolate area, Jake felt a strange energy emanating from the man. After declining the request for a ride, the man left, but something about the encounter left Jake uneasy. As Jake continued working on the tarp, he noticed the man had vanished. However, his relief was short-lived as he heard a snapping noise and discovered the man standing just beyond the tree line, staring at him. Startled, Jake ran to the cockpit, locked the doors, and drove away hastily. Looking in the side mirror, Jake was horrified to see the man seemingly chasing after him on all fours, appearing more like a creature than a human. The unnatural image confirmed Jake's gut feeling that he had encountered something beyond comprehension. To this day, Jake remains haunted by the memory of that bizarre encounter in the Tennessee backwoods, an inexplicable and unsettling incident that defies logical explanation. The strange man, with his animalistic features and unearthly behavior, left an indelible mark on Jake's psyche, serving as a chilling reminder that some mysteries may never be fully understood. I was cruising along, tending to my own business, when out of the blue at 4:20 p.m., my darn truck decides to give up the ghost in the middle of nowhere. Picture this: pitch-black darkness, miles away from any signs of civilization. I mutter under my breath and reach for my phone, only to realize I have zero signal. Fantastic. Just my luck. With no other option, I ring up my boss at 4:22 p.m. and explain the situation. He tells me they won't be able to send any help for at least 7 hours due to my godforsaken location. 7 hours. I could turn into an icicle in that time. Frustrated and desperate for warmth, I start pacing around, hoping for a miracle. And that's when it happens. Out of nowhere, this car pulls up beside me, a vintage sedan that's seen better days. The driver rolls down the window at 4:26 p.m. and offers me a ride into town. Now, normally, I wouldn't trust a stranger in the dead of night, but the thought of a hot cup of coffee and some shelter from the biting cold is too tempting to resist. I cautiously approach the car, the stranger inside motioning for me to hop in. He seems friendly enough, maybe a little too friendly if you ask me. But hey, desperate times call for desperate measures, right? I swallow my reservations and climb into the passenger seat at 4:33 p.m., the warmth of the car hitting me like a blessing. At first, everything seems normal. The guy makes small talk, asking me about my job, where I'm headed, and all that mundane stuff. But as the minutes pass, I start to notice something off about him. It's hard to put my finger on it, but there's this uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Then, out of the blue, he takes a wrong turn at 4:41 p.m. I raise an eyebrow, questioning him about the route. He just chuckles nervously, muttering something about a shortcut. My instincts twitch, and I can't shake the feeling that I've made a terrible mistake. The car's interior grows suffocatingly silent. The only sound is the rhythmic thumping of my heart. I glance out the window, trying to gauge where the heck we're headed. The surroundings become unfamiliar, eerie even. The streetlights flicker ominously, casting long shadows that seem to dance with malevolence. My palms grow sweaty, my mind racing with scenarios of doom. I muster up the courage to confront the driver, demanding to know where he's taking me. But all I get is a sinister smile, his eyes glinting with something dark and twisted. Panic seizes my chest, tightening its grip with every passing moment. Suddenly, at 4:57 p.m., the car comes to a screeching halt in front of this dilapidated old house, straight out of a horror movie with cracked windows and overgrown weeds. My heart drops to my stomach. This can't be good, not at all. The driver turns to me, his grin widening into something truly nightmarish. Before I can react, he locks the car doors at 5:03 p.m., trapping me inside with him. Every instinct in my body screams at me to get the hell out, to fight for my life. But fear paralyzes me, keeping me rooted to the spot. As he opens the car door and steps out, I can hear the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I'm trapped in a nightmare, a helpless prey in the clutches of a predator. I brace myself for whatever hell awaits me outside that car. I muster every ounce of courage I have left and manage to open my car door at 5:10 p.m. The cold night air rushes in, sending a shiver down my spine. My legs feel like jelly as I step out onto the desolate road, my eyes scanning the eerie surroundings. The driver moves around to the trunk at 5:15 p.m., his movements quick and purposeful. The beam of his flashlight dances across the ground, revealing something that chills me to the bone. A body-shaped bag, just like I saw earlier. Dread washes over me like a tidal wave, confirming my worst fears. My mind races, desperately searching for an escape plan. I can't let the sicko get his hands on me. I quietly slip behind the car at 5:21 p.m., hoping to find cover or maybe even a weapon to defend myself. But the world seems to conspire against me as I stumble upon a patch of loose gravel, my foot making a loud crunching noise that pierces the silence. Time stands still for a moment. The driver freezes, his flashlight pointing in my direction. Panic surges through my veins, adrenaline pumping like never before. Without hesitation, I bolt into the nearby dense forest at 5:28 p.m., relying on instincts and sheer survival skills to guide me. Branches slap against my face, twigs snap beneath my feet as I sprint deeper into the darkness. Fear keeps me going, fueling my legs as I push myself beyond the limits of exhaustion. I can hear the faint sound of pursuit behind me, the heavy thuds of footsteps closing in. My lungs burn, and every breath feels like razors slicing through my chest. I risk a quick glance over my shoulder at 5:35 p.m., and to my horror, I see the driver gaining ground. The determination in his eyes sends chills down my spine, igniting a primal fear that drives me to push even harder. But just as my strength wanes and despair threatens to consume me, I spot a faint glow up ahead at 5:42 p.m. Hope flickers inside me, urging me to keep going. As I burst through the trees, a small cabin comes into view, its warm light offering a glimmer of safety in the midst of this nightmare. I slam my fist against the door at 5:50 p.m., desperation etched on my face. A kind-faced older man opens the door at 5:55 p.m., his eyes widening in shock at the sight of me. I manage to gasp out a plea for help, and without a second thought, he pulls me inside and locks the door behind us. In the safety of the cabin, I catch my breath at 6:02 p.m., my heart pounding in my ears. The man offers me a glass of water and calls the police, sharing my harrowing tale with them. As I sit there trembling, I can't help but wonder what fate would have befallen me if not for that stranger and his cabin of refuge. The police arrive shortly after, and I recount every detail of my encounter at 6:15 p.m., determined to ensure that the sick individual who pursued me faces justice. They assure me that they'll do everything in their power to apprehend the deranged driver. Days pass, and I slowly begin to heal from the traumatic experience. The support of my loved ones, and the knowledge that the perpetrator is behind bars, help ease the lingering nightmares. But the memory of that night will forever haunt me,